Uh, Thank you. So let me go on with a quick round of introduction of myself. I'm Anil Gorthi. I've been working in automation field from past 9 years, and I separately host a LinkedIn handle, which is lowcode.nocode. You can follow me there. I've involved myself in 100 plus automation deliveries, which involve multiple tools where we got together different automation tools and different other tools that can help in chats and all as well. And my experience totally lies in digital transformation of many different clients. And also I've come across setting up multiple COE teams for from the past few years. And recently, I've been most involved in UiPath forum. If anyone are active there, you would have seen me answering most of your queries. So you can reach out to me on my handles as well, wherever possible. So without the further delay, let me go into the agenda for today. So we'll be looking at what is solution architect, what's the importance of a solution architect and whole of the life cycle, what are his roles and responsibilities, and we'll see every life cycle event and how a solution architect is involved in each of those events. And at the end, I'll leave some time for any questions from anyone. So this would be our today's agenda. I hope everyone are able to see my screen.
Yes, Anil.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we are good to go.
Okay. So first starting with overview of automation solution architect. Let me start with before going into what is solution architect, what's the role of automation in any of the digital transformation journeys. Nowadays, there's been a rapid transformation in most of the businesses that we're going through. There's been like if we take the past 5, 10 years, there's been many technologies that have come and many new systems that we're going to interact with, and there's a rapid need of automations in them. Why? Because every day we see a lot of iteration that's happening, and with the iteration there's a knowledge gap that comes between person to person. To bridge those gaps, one of the important thing that we need to do is we have to consider automating those particular events, or we need to somehow get those details from each of the person. Like how do we transfer the knowledge to the next person? It's not possible. And also, secondly, we don't want every person to do all those mundane tasks, all those repetitive tasks. We want business to concentrate on more generation and more new tasks that can come in, and a different perspective to be brought in. So that's where automation plays a important role in any of the digital transformation. So bearing these in mind, when we are building automations, we need a specific set of skills that are needed for a person to understand how a digital transformation can be included in the automation journey. So going through that journey, we have to see why and what a automation solution architect's involvement would be. So let me quickly start with that. So coming to the automation solution architect, what are his roles, what are his responsibilities, and how he's involved in each of the stage, and why a solution architect is needed while going through digital transformation. Let me put on with an example. Say we are having some systems that are being developed and we're trying to automate it, but we don't have a complete view, because business would be understanding what needs to be done from the system, but how a developer would be knowing that? The developer knows only how what is documented as per the documented process. But that's where a solution architect needs to convert the business requirements into a proper documented developer format where a developer can understand it. And also, while that is being designed, we have to bridge the gap between the business and what is being expected outcome. So in every possible step, a solution architect's role would be much more significant. So what are the different things that a solution architect needs to be involved in? So one, while driving all the automation initiatives, how? So when we come to that question of how we drive the automation initiatives, nowadays we have been looking at rapidly growing automations also. But how do we source it to every person, or how do we source it to larger audience? How do we grow the automation COE part? How do we get new automations inside? That is where a solution architect would be coming in. That is where he would be looking at all the different systems, like tools like process mining, tools like task mining, which would help you in understanding what are the processes that are going in, what are the gaps that you're trying to bridge, and how a single process is being done in different ways. All of these needs to be understood, and he needs to be driving the automation initiatives accordingly. And one of the important perspective while driving these initiatives, you have to bear in mind any of the automation journey that we're going through, we'd be looking at a cost saving that is important for any of the business. We don't want to disrupt their business. We want all our automations to be efficient. We want the digital transformation to be better. It gives a better perspective, or it needs to increase the productivity, but not decrease our productivity at the end. Like an automation should be able to help you in a way where you increase the efficiency of that particular process, and also at the same time you have to concentrate on reducing the cost for the company, because that is where we get the more advantage, right? We don't want some automation to be built which costs more than doing it in a manual perspective. So that's one of the significant steps that we have to bear in mind while going through the automation journey. And a solution architect plays a very important role in understanding it. We don't want to select few automations which actually increases the load on people. We want to reduce that load and increase their efficiency apart from that also. So is the automation directly proportionate to efficiency? In a way, yes. That is how we have to design the process. So we have to make sure the automation helps the person, and also at the same time when some part of it is automated, the other person needs to increase his speed in doing other things. That's how the automation should help him. Coming to the next one, accuracy and quality. We have to every time the accuracy of your bots is very much important in looking at how automation is being driven, because once your accuracy goes down or the quality of the product goes down, no one likes to use it. That's where we lose the confidence from the business as well. So we have to, a solution architect needs to think from the perspective that I need to understand what is the exact business requirement, and to fill the gap between the business requirement from the solution architect perspective. And also at the same time we have to make sure that each of the automation initiatives that we are picking up, how quality product that we're going to deliver. These all are the important roles that a solution architect needs to perform or needs to have uh, in his portfolio going on. Last is the scalability and flexibility. As we are speaking on the digital transformation, we have seen a rapid change in most of the systems. There's been tons and tons of new data that's coming in. We have to be able to, in a situation that we manage that particular data that's coming in, we should be able to be in a phase where we're flexible enough to get the automation does do the job for more data or more cases that we're getting in. For example, we're getting some invoices from some system, and tomorrow we're expecting few more hundreds of invoices. Our automation should be able to handle it. That's the way that any solution architect needs to think. It shouldn't be like, okay, for now this is the case, we have 1,000 invoices, we are able to process it. That's not where the solution architect would be helping. So when we're thinking of it, these are the basic points that we have to bear in mind before going through designing or anything. In the requirement gathering phase itself, we have to get through all of those stages. So in detail we'll see each of the roles that are required for a solution architect to go on with. So that would be our next part, where we'll see what are the roles and responsibilities of solution architect in each of the phases that we have. So in the requirement gathering phase, ideally we'll be having a business stakeholder, and also we have a process SME that comes in. We'll have other business analysts that would be taking up the process. But before doing all of that, we have something called as a UiPath automation hub, where multiple ideas can be submitted. We have to first check which automation idea actually needs to be prioritized. Who does that job? A solution architect would be doing that job. Why? Because he would be the person who can analyze and see which is a best candidate for the automation and why that is best. For that we have different criterias. We have criterias like what are the ROI savings, what are the best suited automations that we can develop, what systems that we are interacting with, what are the readily available components that we have. All of those needs to be analyzed while doing the requirement gathering phase. We have to make sure that these all details have been captured, like what is the volume that we're going to look at, what's the peak volume that we'll see, what is the minimum volume that we might see, when is the maximum volume that's coming in, and how do we tackle those things. These are the things that we can get the details only from the business perspective, because they are pretty close to business, that they know when the maximum effort would be coming in. But how would we get those details? That is where solution architect role comes into picture, where he'd be talking with each of the stakeholders, not only to document the process. The documentation of the process comes in the phase where once we idealize the process and once we finalize that, okay, this is the process that we're going to move forward with. So how the decision of how, why, and what's the ROI that's coming in, these are where a solution architect needs to look at by prioritizing each of the automation ideas or the opportunities that we're getting. This is where a solution architect is very much important in the requirement gathering phase also. It's not only on the design phase or during the development your solution architect would be coming in, but right from the start of your automation, right from the start where you get the business requirements to be gathered, that is where your solution architect picture comes into, and that is where he'll be helping you in every phase. So that's where we have to make sure that RPA solution architect or a automation solution architect would be involved in those phases as well, because that he can give his own perspective by understanding the business pain points and by understanding each of the business different scenarios that the business can come up with, because one process can be done by multiple people in multiple ways. And a technical attuned person can be understanding uh, what needs to be done and how best that can be suited for the current automation. So this is where the initial requirement gathering phase, your solution architect perspective would be important. Then coming to the tool selection. While tool selection, there's been multiple tools that are available. When I say tools, UiPath has you have a AI center, you have a document understanding tool, you have a communication mining, you have a UiPath app. So there are multiple tools that are available. But how do you collaborate between them? What are needed for the current process? Again, that needs to be this step would be the core process for whole of your design, because this is where you'll first try to understand what the requirements are for the business, and depending on the requirement you'd analyze what's the best fitted tool. Every time going on with using a document understanding or an AI center for a PDF might not be reliable, or might not be useful as well, because while we're talking about document understanding, we have only one variation of invoice. Say for suppose it's coming in, and if we use AI center, we're consuming more licenses. So we're, in a way, for a simple process, we're trying to make it complex and trying to consume more AI units, which we don't want to do. So that's where tool selection and the right tool for each of the specific task is very much important to take in. Or per se, there is an approval cycle that's there in between. We have something called as UiPath Action Center. We can leverage Action Center instead of creating a UiPath app just to get the approvals from the end user. So this is where right set of tools needs to be selected, which are matching to our organization and which are matching to the business process specifically. And at the same time, we have to make sure all the licenses and the support models have been taken care. Why? Because why when we say when we get to that point, say we are trying to use AI center for a very simple process also, then the AI units that you're going to consume are pretty high, which costs you a very high value, which will toss in your ROI for the process. So that is where you have to make sure each of these considerations are taken in while doing the tool selection. So these are the basic things that so after the requirement gathering phase, before chiming into the design directly, we'll first decide what are the tools, what are the why it fits for the business, and if is this particular uh, process needs something that is having high license consumption. That's something that we need to design at this phase. If we need multi-bot, if we don't need it, that is where we'll do all of these selections in. Next, coming to the design and architecture. So once we have all the tools in place, once we know what needs to be done from the business perspective, the next comes the important piece, changing the business requirements to a developer understandable format, because all the developers might not know each of the systems. While working on automations, we'd be working on like 20 different systems in 20 different automations, and every developer might not know each of the system details, each of the minute details that might go into the system. So that is where a solution architect role would be in preparing the initial technical document for that, where the technical document will actually have the details of all the business related data converted into a technical detailed format, where it'll talk about what are the different workflows that are need to be developed, how the workflows needs to be tied back, what is the input for each of it, and what are the outputs that we're expecting, what format is needed, if some specific validation is to be done, what are the validations that are to be defined. End to end, all of these details needs to be done, because when we are looking at an automation process, we might not look at only one single system or one single automation to be developed, or a one single RPA flow might not be enough. We might be one automation process might contain three or four different bots that we might be developing, and three or four different developers might be working on the same. How do you tie back all of them? That is where solution architect needs to ensure that all of these details are tied back to the single automation process to run seamlessly. So that is where you have to make sure each of the technical design document has been prepared with well documented workflows. What are the details that are to be present inside the workflows, what are the different applications that you're going to interact, and how you're going to interact, what is the end result that you're expecting. And say if you're using queues, we have something called as UiPath insights, where we can get the insights. So what are the analytic data that you need from each of the queue items? All of those details needs to be considered, and we have to document all of them so that the developer can convert it into automation format. So this is where initial design document needs to be developed by a solution architect. And coming to integrating RPA systems with existing systems, we have so many legacy as well as modern systems that we'd be working with. The automation that you're developing needs to be working with both the systems seamlessly. It's not that you'd be working only with one system at one time. You might be working with multiple systems also, but you don't want to disrupt those systems or disrupt that automation without proper integration between those systems. And when you're considering how you interact with the systems, there might be possibilities where the system might be rapidly changing, the UI might be rapidly changing. You have to look at alternative ways of working with it. Like for example, you can look at working with it through backend using APIs. We have something called as integration services, where we can create an integration service and we can use all the APIs interaction with the uh, end system instead of going through the UI. That way it would help in making it faster and also more reliable. So these are few things that we have to bear in mind. How do we do that? And while doing all of this, one thing very much important, as we spoke first also, is the scalability. Every automation that we're building, we have to make sure today the requirement might be small, but tomorrow, when we have hundreds of bots that are running, we might see some correlation between the bots as well. How do we scale them? How do we link them together? How flexible is your bot? How scalable is your bot? How many more licenses you can add if the peak volume increases? These are all few of the things that you have to consider when designing and designing the bot, and provide the architecture accordingly. We'll see few examples later on how do we design few of the things as well. And And this is where the initial design setup was done. Now coming to the development oversights. So while the developer is going on through the development phase, there might be many issues that might be coming up. Like say if the system might be reacting different than what is being documented. There might, because most of the times we see that business would be using the systems in their own way. They might be saving that few pages. They might be saving favorites in the system, but we have to make sure those are, and that causes a kind of disruption while you're developing the automation. So you have to make sure that whenever a developer has some issue, solution architect would be chiming in. He'd be looking at those things, what is actually stopping the developer from, and ensure that he gets that enough time and enough resolutions that are to be done. These are few of the minute things, but those would help in rapidly developing the automations. Because say we have few reusable components that we have developed, but the developer is not aware of it. How do we tackle them? That's where we have to make sure in our design we check those details also, and while doing the development we ensure that any of the components that are developed are not redeveloped again. No rework is being done. All of those needs to be taken care during our development oversight only. And coming to the review of the codes, this is one of the important part. All of we have workflow analyzer where the basic review of each of your standards that are being followed are taken into consideration. Apart from the workflow analyzer, there are a few things that you might need to consider as a solution architect is if the design document that you have provided is accurately transformed into an automation or not. Most of the times there might be different ways to reach at the goal when you're building an automation, but what's the reliable way? What's the best way that you're going on? Maybe there is a drop down on the system that the developer is working with. Maybe the drop down search is being done using a loop, but there's no check for the infinite loop check. Those are few things that we need to bear in mind, those checks have been made or not. Or else we leave the automation there, and someday the value is not found in the drop down. We leave that in a infinite loop, which we don't want. So these are few of the considerations while doing through the development we have to take care, and while doing the review of the code, these are the few things that we need to consider. Next, coming to the testing and validation. While testing, we have to first make sure all the UAT requirements would be documented. But other than the UAT requirements, there are unit testings that you would be doing. There are technical tests that you would be doing. There are many technical exceptions that you might be expecting. You might be seeing like when you're trying to log in, there might be screen change in the next one. Is that being validated or not? Those are few of the checks that are to be performed and overseen. While the testing is going on, there might be few results that you might be looking at where it is not expected as the end result, but still the bot is going to success, which is not expected. Those needs to be fixed. Those needs to be cleared. Who is responsible again? The developer holds the responsibility of doing it, but solution architect needs to understand that developer might not know each of the edge scenarios. Developer might not get all the details from it. So solution architect needs to ensure those cases have been documented so that we can think from that perspective and those can be handled. So this is where involvement of solution architect again in testing would be very much important. And while resolving the bugs and issues, most of the cases we see during UAT, we see there are many different issues that are coming up. That's because while doing UAT, a user would be sending the data and the developer would not be using the standard data that he has. So are these validations taken care? If not, why? Why is it missing? The analysis of this why will help you in designing the next spot for you as well. Because you have missed some validation now. How do you traverse that knowledge to the next spot? That's where it is important to understand that a solution architect needs to be involved in those phases and also understand why those have been occurred. so that it can be traversed across to the next bots as well, so that next time we don't do the same mistake again. That's where we document those things, and that's where we do the validation, that's where we resolve, but that's where we maintain all of those details. And in whole of this phase, why solution architect needs to be involved? Because you'd be working with 20 different developers. 20 developers might not have all the knowledge, so that's where if you have who would be the center as a solution architect for that process or for that automation. So that's where he needs to know what's the issue that's going on, how it is being tackled, is it the right way to tackle or not, and is it analyzed properly or not. So these are different things that we, a solution architect, needs to consider while going on through the testing of any of the automations. Also, when we are testing, we might be developing multiple bots for the same process. Uh, there might be multiple systems that would be interacting. Are those being correlated together? Is the data being hand in hand for each of the bot? These are few of the considerations that needs to be considered. Last, coming to the governance and compliance, this is one of the very important topic that we need to look at, because in this digital world, we'll see that data is very much important. You don't want your data to be exposed to everyone. You don't want the data to be lost. You don't want your automations to give out your secure data to anyone. So for that, how do you ensure it? Say, for example, you having some PII data, some personal data that you're using in the process. You have to make sure each of those activities have private checked. These are few of the checks that a solution architect needs to ensure, so that the data is not being lost or data is not being logged, because some information should not be left out. And while you're adding queue items, this PI data should not be added directly to the queue. Why? Because there'd be a support person that would be considering and looking at the queues. He can know the information easily. We don't want that. Maybe there's a recently there's been one automation where we did a automation for the payroll cycle, and we don't want each of the person's payrolls to be disclosed to everyone, right? So that's where the information security and governance and ensuring each of it is very important, not only at the high level where the basic storage of passwords and all, we use keyword password walls, etc. Apart from that, when you're storing any of the data also at the very minute level as well, you have to think through if this data is important to be stored, or can it be maintained in one system? Are you replicating it anywhere? If you're replicating, are you trying to clear it or not? These are few of the key things that you're going to consider while going through different automations that you're building. Because if the data is being lost, you're losing your business perspective, or you're losing your business confidence that they would be using that automation, because they don't want to use it because there's a data leak or the data breach. That's something that we have to make sure by using different possible ways. Like, for example, in the queues, if you want to store some information, we need to store it by encrypting it, which can be decrypted only via keys, which can again be stored in a key vault. So these are few of the key things that we need to ensure. And who would be responsible for all of this? Again, it would be the solution architect who would be responsible for these things. So governance and compliance is a very important aspect whenever we look at the automation perspective or any other development that we're going through. Now, let me go on with a use case. So there's a simple use case that I've uh, developed here. So let's go through it one by one. So initially, the use case is about sending some emails to a bot with attachments, which contains details about multiple invoices. So there's an attachment of Excel, which would contain multiple attachments, and each invoice we have to search in a system, and that system would be having the actual invoice PDFs and other related documents in it, and we need to download and share it in a SharePoint. And few of the considerations that we need to see is that the peak volume count can be up to 3,000 invoices per day. and they need a consolidated report that is to be sent for each of the set of invoices or each of the email that we get. And there are multiple emails that you might receive on a day, and emails are to be, the expectation from the business is that emails are to be picked immediately. So these are few of the considerations that we look at. While doing that, let's see at a design, initial design, what we can think of. So the SME sends an email. We'll verify if the attachment is present or not in the email. Then we'll save that attachment. We'll go through each of the invoice details or each of the row in that Excel, and then go through the third party service, validate it, and then download each of the invoice and generate the consolidated report, send it back to the SME. And one of the design considerations we are considering here is bot runs every 15 minutes. Few things to consider while going through the initial design. This looks pretty good. There wouldn't be any flaws, or yeah, this can work out, right? This is where we'll try to chime and think that we'll go ahead with this particular design. But what are the pain points in this? First, we, there's a consideration that we're going through is bot runs every 15 minutes. So which takes a toss on your license. One of the bot would be always locked because of this consideration. There might not be any email that you're getting on some day. Even on that day, the machine would be busy because the bot would be running just to check the emails, which is not the expectation, right? As a solution architect, you have to think from the perspective where you save the license also. License management and cost cutting is one of the important aspect that a solution architect needs to think into. So that's the very first consideration that it goes off. Second, we are saving the attachments, but we are not validating it again. We have to validate each of those details. So let's look at the upgraded design. There would be, we can, this is one of the designs that we can think of. There might be multiple scenarios as well. One of it, UiPath has a service called integration services, where we can integrate our Office 365 emails, and on a send of email, the bot can be triggered. This is one of the triggers that's available. How does it help? We need not trigger the bot every 15 minutes. That way we are saving the license. So this is one of the trigger that we can use, where initially when the SME sends the email, then only the bot would trigger. It wouldn't simply check every time by running a bot on a machine and allocating a license to it. We don't want to do it. So this would be one of the ideal scenario where we'll be using an integration service. Then the email is triggered. Then we check if attachment is present or not. Then we validate the attachment. When we say validation, why is it important? We don't want the bot to go into open the system. Then while entering the data into the system, some data is null, some data is empty. We don't want to do at that level, right? We want to validate the data first, which is coming in, because again, at the end of the day, the data is sent by a human. It's not an automated data. So that's where validation steps are really important. A solution architect needs to think through these details. What are the different validations that he can keep for each of the columns or each of the data items that we have? So if we have any validation errors, we need to send back an exception to the SME so that he can correct it and redo it. He doesn't, it wouldn't be good after going through half of the process, the bot fails over there because some information is not there. We don't want that to happen, right? So we want to validate it first, then go into it. Second, while adding to the queue, as all the data needs to be added and all is the validated data now, we'd be going on with converting the attachment and adding a bulk queue items. Then we send an email to the SME stating your invoices have been considered. This gives one this is one assurance, kind of. That is where business would appreciate these. Like that is where business would understand, okay, my email has been read. Or else if in the previous scenario, if you take, the email is being processed, we're not having any emails that are being sent till the end consolidated report. Say the bot fails in between. How do you know? Or when does the business know that email has been picked up? Say 15 people have sent 15 emails and bot is still processing the first one. How does the 15th person know that he needs to wait for so much time? He doesn't have all those details, right? Like that is where breaking it to as much small things as possible, and at the same time ensuring scalability comes into picture when we are designing all of these. Second bot can be the place where it'll have a queue based trigger, and this will be a multi-bot architecture. Why? Because there's one system that we'll be going through. We have all the data that we need. Each of the invoices separate, each of the downloads are separate, so all the downloads can happen parallelly. So we can have a multi-bot architecture there. Why are we having a multi-bot architecture? As per the initial design considerations, that there can be around peak load of 3000 invoices. When there are 3000 invoices on an average, if we consider 3 to 5 minutes for one bot to complete or one invoice to be completed, we're looking at close to what, 15,000 minutes, which is not even viable to do it in a day. And we don't want that situation to be there. We want to reduce the cost also, and at the same time make it efficient. How do you make it efficient? Which is the pain point in this particular flow. The pain point is basically in getting all those invoices downloaded. So once it is validated in the first bot, the second bot will get the invoice details from the queue, then update each of those details and get each of the data that you need, and just write the status back to it. How does it help? Tomorrow you're having a increase in volume from 3000 to 10,000 because your company has grown. How do you scale it? This is where you can scale it. You can give more licenses to the second bot, and the second bot can run on 25 different systems. It can run on 50 different systems now. If your invoices are increasing, accordingly increase the license utilization. That's where it will help you. Coming to the last part, there needs to be some round of report that is needed for the SME. So once the first bot complete, the second bot completes, the second bot would add a item to the different queue, which is on a queue based trigger again for the third bot, where the third bot would be getting details from the queue, and also will create a report and send an email to SME. If there are multiple that are completed, it will try to send multiple emails also. This way, we are ensuring each of the task is done separately, and also on an aggregated basis. There's a lot of scalability that you can increase on this. So this is one of the scenario where a solution architect needs to think through on what are the different possible tools that are available, if we are selecting the right set of tools or not, and also if we are properly dividing the process into different instances or not. If the tool selection of integration services to having the initial trigger is not selected, we're going on with running the bot every 15 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, which costs a lot of license, lot of machine, and which is not ideal way. And also if you're not dividing the bot after validating your invoice details, you're not able to scale the bot. Only one bot would be running always, and when you have a peak load increasing, the same bot cannot cater for all the details. There needs to be, the business won't be interested in doing it, right? We don't want the business to go off again. We want more people to do automations. We want more automations to scale up. We want business to do better jobs. That's when there's a increased scope that you would see. So this is one of the clean example where we can see that different items needs to be tied back, and how do we segregate the processes. More details on each of these details would be provided in the next sessions that we're going through. And the last piece that I'd be covering is the automation lifecycle, and what's the SA involvement in each of the lifecycle items, and what are the different tools we'll talk here. First, ideation and selection. During this phase, we'll be going on, we have something called as UiPath Automation Hub, where different ideas can be submitted by different people. And all of those ideas can be taken into consideration, but how do you consider? Again, looking at the ROI maps. How do you know ROIs? Your automation hub has those details. Use them. Use those details to know those ROIs. You check the feasibilities of them. See how the automations are suitable, and what are the quick wins that you can get. Say there is one quick win that you're going to do. First, go on with the quick wins which give high ROIs. Why? That will ensure that business is very much confident on your automation, and they'll be going to provide you with more details and more automations going forward. And they'll also think from the perspective where automation can help you. If you take the toughest one first, the problem would be you might not be well set up also. And if the accuracy of the bot goes low, the business won't be very much comfortable. So solution architect needs to think in a perspective where it should be a quick win also, and at the same time we should ensure that ROI has a very good impact on it. This is where in the ideation phase we'll use tools like automation hub, where different ideas can be submitted and we evaluate them through ROI dashboards, looking at what are the different perspectives, what's the headcount reduction that we can do, etc. Next, coming to the analyze and design phase, this is where you have tools like task mining and process mining coming into picture. So once you have the idea to be considered, you need to first know what are the different possibilities. Again, why? That is one of the question or the important key element that you need to consider, because one process can be done by 10 different people, and all the 10 different people might be doing in 10 different ways. We don't want to do that. We want to standardize that. That is where you have to design an automation flow. While designing it, you have to make sure all the details are captured, know all the different scenarios, and if it is a real different scenario, or if it is a case where it is being done in a different way, that is something that you need to consider and you need to move forward. So for this, tools like process mining, task mining. In task mining, you have a unassisted and assisted as well. Unassisted will help you in analyzing your tasks after you develop your automation as well. So once you develop your automation, you want to know where there are gaps. You can use an unassisted task mining while the bot is running, and it'll give you a process view of what is being wrong, what are being exceptioned out, what are not being processed, what are being processed, etc. All those details can be considered, and these are the different tools that will help you in those. Now coming to the development and testing, tools like Studio Web, integration services, having the knowledge of all of those details for a solution architect is important. Again, why? Because we have a rapidly going transformation, right? We don't want to lack in what we're doing. We want to use which is being helpful more. For example, recently in UiPath document understanding, we have Gen AI integration. We have an integration where we need not indicate each of the elements. Rather, we just ask a question to Gen AI and it replies with that answer. Why not use it? That's where you'll increase the scope of automation, right? That's where you'll increase the speed of your automation. So we have to consider all of those collaborative tools and build automations. And at times there might be cases where you'd be using your own ML models. Why not build a Python script for it? Load that ML model to your AI center, use it in identifying all the details. That is where all of it ties back. There might be some cases where you might be doing complex Excel logics or complex data manipulations. Using the in-house tools you might not be doing. You might want to integrate it with a tool like Alteryx, which provides more predictive analysis, etc., for your capabilities. So seamlessly you can integrate RPA with it. You have to think through those tools and how they would be helping you in your automation journey as well. All of these needs to be considered while the solution architect comes into play. Finally, coming to the deployment and go live. For this, two things to bear in mind. One, how are we transitioning it? How are we transitioning it to the business? How are we providing training to them? Why is it important? Again, business would use your automation only when they know how to use it properly, how best that can be used. For that, you'll have something called as a runbook that you'll be creating, where you'll have all the details about the automation, how you can trigger an automation, how the automation would go forward, what are the different details that you'll get from it, what are the different exceptions that can come out of the automation, and how do you handle those automation. All of these details needs to be documented. A proper design document needs to be there. A proper run book needs to be provided to them. And we have to ensure, why do we need to do this run book? Why not directly say that? one thing, they might lose the track of it. There might be n number of exceptions that you might be throwing, and the end user might not remember all of them. And at the same time, there might be a change in the person who would be doing that automation or who would be using that automation. We don't want to and when we traverse the data from one person to another, there's a data loss. We don't want that. So that's where proper training and proper support needs to be provided for the end user. And also, while doing these go lives or deployments, we have to ensure there is minimum disruption to the business. We shouldn't change their original process, but we have to inculcate the automation in a way that the original process is not changed, but you still are able to get to that phase where they're able to use it seamlessly. So this is where your deployment and go live phase would come in for a solution architect to ensure that these all details are considered for each of the automation that is being built.
Anil, sorry to disturb.
Yeah,
So we are left with 5 more minutes.
sure. Thank you. So lastly, coming to the maintenance and support perspective, uh, we need to ensure that each of the details that we are giving in automation are scalable or can be maintained. Why is this needed? There might be 20 support people working on 200 different automations, and when an automation fails, we don't want there might the support person might not have all the knowledge. He might be having only the details from a well documented SDD. So we have to ensure there's no disruption in it, there's no SLA loss for the business. So these are few of the things that we need to, or a solution architect needs to consider while supporting those automation solutions. And while all of these are going on, we have to ensure that how we make that automation better, because every time the same automation might not be used in the same way. There might be few different perspectives that would be coming in, there might be few different cases that might coming in while the maintenance is going on. How do you know all these details? Again, you have something called as UiPath insights, where you can tie back all the data, you can visualize. So whenever you develop a process, you have to ensure that a proper visualization of the end result also is being done, and all the different cases that are being tracked. So these are few of the key points that we have to bear in mind while designing any of the process, because not only getting the business perspective, but also at the end from the technical acumen, how you're trying to drive the automation is something that is very much important. So these are different life cycle elements and everywhere where a solution architect would be involved in. Hope this gives you a nice overview of it. And thank you. Here concludes our session. Thank you, team. Thank you, Niklesh and Patrudu. You have known both of them. Niklesh is the head of Hyderabad chapter, largest chapter in UiPath community, and Patrudu has been chapter lead for Vizag recently and has been doing an amazing job. Thank you, both of you, for this opportunity. And UiPath community, Rohit, thanks a lot for giving this support for this series. And What's Infinity has been really helpful in setting up all the connections between us and smoothly transition the session throughout. So let me open board for any of the questions, either or we can take few questions from the chat as well if we have any.
Yes. So first of all, like thank you so much for the wonderful and awesome session, Anil. So it's really great. So still we have 220 places people on the board. So we'll take some questions. So between that, thank you so much, Divya, for answering all the queries before you jump in. So Divya has almost answered all the questions. So thank you so much, Divya, UiPath MVP. So thank you so much. So you can check the chat and we'll quickly jump into the other topic if we don't have anything. Yeah.
Thank you, Divya. Thank you so much.
And so between one more thing, like there is a slight uh, editing might be wrong. So today's moderator is Saikiran Kundreddy. So our password is for tomorrow, so might be a small mistake. So yeah, just to mention that. So if we don't, yeah. So
Thanks,
if we
thanks, Saikaran, and Divya for answering all the questions, for the amazing support as well. Thank you, Sai.
And guys, like if you don't have any questions, so we can jump into the quiz session, which will be an interesting part for all of us. So basically, who don't know this quiz or Mentimeter? So basically, we just want to see your understanding about these sessions particularly, and we'll be having one or two, I mean, two or three multiple choice questions. So please open the mentimeter.com site and enter the code. So if you join from your mobile, you can directly go to the link and you can just give the code over there, and then immediately you will jump into the quiz session. So there is a multiple choice question, three questions or two questions. So you need to answer it, and whoever answered correct, or who are in the leaderboard from the UiPath community or from the bot infinite solutions, the support of the company, so they are going to provide you small goodie over the. So this is something we just want to give you the active participation. So we just need to check the, we are just checking the active participation, but nothing more than that. So any other questions if you see?
Uh, yeah, one interesting question that I see in the chat from Suresh Reddy about SA being involved in every phase, but at which phase SA has the large scope to make strong impact. So, Suresh, to answer that, uh, we'd be going through the similar process in the next life cycle series events also. So you'll get a wider knowledge on that to start with. And to answer your question, right from the start phase or the business requirement gathering phase, that is where your solution architect involvement is much more effective, or the initial phase to understand which needs to be considered, and also how the business requirements are being understood is where your solution architect involvement is more. So that is where your main phase or the main involvement of your solution architect would be there. It's not only in the technical perspective, but also how the business understanding has been taken in and how it is being converted to the technical knowledge is where the solution architect's role would be coming in first, if that answers your question.
Yeah,
Sorry, Nikhil, you
yeah,
can take ahead.
yes, thanks for that. So I think most of the questions, the forwarded questions will be answered in the next session. So I would like to go through the next agenda of the session. So I don't want to take your time more. So let me share my screen again. Like before I share my screen, so request you all to open the menti.com. So the link is given again. So let me do that again. So I have given a link over the chart. So please open that link, and the code is 23592730. That is the code of the Menti. So hope my screen is visible. So is it my screen visible? Anybody can confirm?
Yes, Nicholas, it's visible.
Yes. So again, sorry to disturb you or whoever came last. So this is the main link where you will able to see the all the series links. So just click on register and just click on submit. So you will be able to join for all the sessions. And tomorrow there is one more important session, that is solution architect in process analysis. So which is a very important topic led by S. Raju and myself Nikhilesh. So we'll be talking tomorrow. So just register for tomorrow's session. And so I hope I see a lot of people join the Menti. So let's quickly jump into the Menti and we'll see the results. Yeah. So hope my screen again and sharing, guys. Sorry, just confirm me. I think most of the people answered. So the first question, is like sorry, let me load this here. So the first question is, in which phase the solution architect is to be involved in the life cycle? So there are four options. So I will wait for 30 seconds here to give more people. I think yeah, 120 people has been joined the things. Guys, like there are 190 people. I will just wait for 130 more seconds. So okay. So shall I move to the next question? So because I see 190 people and I see only 125 people joined. So yeah, let me jump into the another thing. The next question would be, the next question is, who will be the key person to design the solution for an automation? So let's wait for the answers. So I will wait 30 more seconds to see the results, or we'll proceed for the next question. Okay, so okay, so let's see the answer. So the answer is solution architect. So whoever, most of the people has been given, whoever given technical manager or business analyst. So the answer is solution architect. So let us see the magic now. The leaderboard, the magic will be created now. Give me 1 second. So top is participant.
In the interim gap,